Hi guys, I'm Chris with Dream Studios. Welcome to episode 12 of my Advanced Tinkercad tutorial series. In this episode, we're talking about keys. Keying your resin parts together using shapes. I've got a lot of experience in practical model building, and I know the shapes that you need to properly key parts together. So we're going to be talking about shapes. We're going to be talking about the transparency tool in Tinkercad, and we're also using the cruise tool. So this time we're talking about introducing keys into your parts so that you don't really need even adhesive if you have it dialed in just right. You can key your parts together very simply by using these techniques. Okay guys, let's go ahead and jump into this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're talking about 3 different kinds of keys. Cones that'll be truncated, we'll make this from scratch. Blocks that are tapered, we'll also make this from scratch. I'll use a square example and a rectangular example. And directional keys. These are 2 shapes that I use sometimes. So let's go ahead and open up our project. And let's make a little sample. Just a really easy sample here that will be a mug, and we'll make the handle a separate piece. So I'm just going to make a nice fat mug here. Real quick, we'll just bring these blocks out here. Subtract this guy. And over here, we'll make a handle out of this. Let's go ahead and give it a taper. Shrink this guy. Okay, and that fast and easy. We have a mug, and we'll use this as our first example. Now we could grab this part, duplicate it, and embed it with our snap grid up to off. We can embed this, kind of just push it in here and subtract it from the mug. But this is going to present problems in the end because your printer isn't always exact. There's a little bit of a tolerance. So these parts probably most likely wouldn't fit without trimming and a bit of a hassle. So that's one way of doing it, but we're not doing it that way. That causes problems. We are using keys. Okay, so here we have our part. Oops, let's get this grouped again. And we are going to attach this as a separate piece using keys. Our first key example will be blocks. I'm going to make a square example, and I'm going to make a tapered example. So I'm going to shrink this down. Hit my F key to center this. So I want to turn this into a taper. I'm going to elongate that side a little bit. Alright, so we're going to turn this into a taper. You don't want a square key. You want to really avoid square keys because, as I said, you're going to have fitment problems. The printer is going to print one part larger than the other, and they don't work. Don't do it. Stay away from flat-edged keys. So I'm going to make a taper out of this box just by duplicating another box and bringing it across to all 4 sides. I'm going to take advantage of my align feature to flip these boxes. I can grab both these boxes and turn them 90 degrees. Duplicate the boxes, then turn them 90. Nudge these in. Start doing my groups. And here we have a tapered box. Do a little bit of adjustment. Okay, here's our tapered box. I can manipulate this to make it more rectangular. I can manipulate this to be more square. I'm actually going to make both shapes. I can squeeze it down to a more desirable shape. And I'm really happy now with these two samples. Let's go ahead now and use these keys to attach this handle. So I'm going to bring this handle out of here. I'm going to turn these, actually I'm going to duplicate these keys in case we want to use them again. I'm going to turn these keys 90 degrees. I'm going to shrink them to fit. And even though this handle is symmetrical, we'll pretend that we want to make sure that the builder puts this on with top up. So I'm going to use both keys. I'm going to use this key here, the square key. I'm going to turn that into a hole to make absolutely certain that it's embedded. You can see the color change there. Bam, that's embedded. And I like its position. Let's grab this second guy. We're going to move him up here. So the rectangle key will be for the top of the mug handle. I'm going to shrink him. Let's turn him sideways. Shrink him again. And we're going to push it into that part. Make sure it's embedded. Center them up a little bit. Okay, and there we go. Let's turn those back into solids. Whoops, I meant to turn this into a solid. These two will make green. The handle will make white. Okay, here is our handle with the keys. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to keep him over here to the side. I'm going to group this set. Group it. Now we're going to move him into position over here. What I want to do is make sure that it's centered to the mug. Use my align key. Choose the mug as my parent. Now, I'm going to turn this into a hole. I want to embed these keys and not the handle. So I'm making sure my snap grid is set to off. Arrow keys, shift, and now just the arrow key. And I'm going to get these handles, if you can see what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that only those keys are touching that surface. And that is exactly right there. And if I wanted to see how deep these are, I can turn this mug body into a transparency. And I can see that these guys are embedded that far, which is fine. It's fine with me. If you wanted to make them deeper, you can take this out and deepen these up, group it, bring it back in. But I'm happy with this. I'm going to turn my solid back on. Okay, now let's work with these keys. So this is one piece. I'm only interested in these keys, so I am going to separate this handle from the keys. Now I want to take these guys and I want to enlarge them just a little bit. The tolerance of this key inside of a key that's the exact shape might be a problem when you go to assemble. The tolerances of printing, that key on this handle might print a little bit larger than that hole, or it might print a little bit smaller than the hole. So we want to give this a little bit of extra wiggle room. So I'm going to take this key, I'm going to duplicate it, I'm going to turn it into a wildly different color, and I'm going to enlarge it because I want this hole to be ever so slightly larger. So I'm at 4.25 tall, you can see here. I'm going to enlarge this just a bit, half a millimeter, maybe not even that much, just a bit. Something like this. That's about a little more than a quarter millimeter. I'm going to turn that into a hole, and I'm going to center this over my original key. Since it's a little bit bigger, I can push it in. Make sure that I'm looking centered. That looks looking great to me. Actually, it might be a little bit large, so I'm going to shrink it just a little bit more. That is going to give you a little wiggle room, little tolerance. So the key is going to fit great, and it won't give you problems. So you can see there I deleted my original. I'm going to take this key, duplicate it. I'm going to bring it down. Oops, that's not going to work. Different shapes for my sample. I'm going to come back over to this key. Same thing. I'm going to duplicate it, change it into a different color, slightly enlarge it, turn it back into a hole, make sure it's centered over the original key, push it in. That's just an arrow key sideways. I'm going to delete my original key, smaller key, and there we go. So now I've got two keys that are slightly enlarged. I'm going to group them. I'm going to select my mug, group again, and there, I guarantee that these keys are going to work with a little bit of extra space. Group my original. Actually, yes, that is correct. So now I know that these keys are going to fit with a little bit of tolerance. I can turn that into a hole, and I'm going to have a little bit of tolerance here when these things mate up. Okay, there is one example of creating a key system, very simple, that's going to work fantastic for joining your parts together. Now I would save this STL separately. There we go. Our next example will be a directional key. This will be for putting a detail on. You want to make sure that the builder is going to put this on correctly. So I've got this random part here. I'm going to duplicate this. Let's turn it 90. And let's get this. Let's say that your design has this greebly right in the middle. Well, actually, let's say that it's not supposed to be in the middle. Your design has it over here. And it's pushed in. This is what your design is. You want that greebly orienting up like this, angled up. You want to make sure that that builder is going to put that on correctly. So we're going to put a directional key on this. So there's no mistakes. This will be a no-brainer for your builder when he's assembling. No mistakes. I'm going to turn this upside down. We're going to use a directional key. I'm going to grab this polygon. You can see over here I've got controls for it. I'm going to turn this into a pentagon. 5 sides. I can also use a pyramid on this. I like using this pentagon because it's only going to go on one way. I'm going to align this up here. I'm going to enlarge this key. And I'm going to shrink it. I'm going to make sure that it's embedding inside of my part. Going to come up to my align tool and center it. Doesn't need to be quite this tall. And you don't really have to taper this. You could spend time tapering this. I'm just going to use this as is. So I'm going to group these two objects. I like that key. I am going to group these guys. I'm going to duplicate this object just as insurance. Keep it off to the side. Turn this to a different color. I'm going to rotate this back up. Actually, what do we want to do? We're going to mirror this. And we're going to flip it up 90. I'm going to orient this by using, again, my alignment tool. Choose that as my master. Both objects. Align tool. Grab this guy. Hit your center icons. And now I can get rid of my original sample here. Okay, I'm going to turn this into a hole. I only want that pentagon to penetrate. So I'm going to rotate over here, use my arrow key sideways, and get that key to embed only the key. Okay, there is the key. This is all one piece. I'm going to ungroup it. I only want this. I'm only concerned about this. The way it's oriented is exactly what I want. I'm going to turn it into a hole. I'm going to duplicate it. And I want this hole to be slightly larger to allow for that printing tolerance. I don't want the fit to be so tight that it's a hassle putting it on there and someone has to go and trim. Turn this back into a hole. Actually, I'm going to turn this into a transparency so I can see through it. I'm going to nudge it down just a tiny bit. That looks to me like I'm embedded. I'm going to change it into a different, wildly different color. I'm going to sink it into the same level as the original. Okay, now we can delete our original, smaller version. Actually, let's make another tiny little adjustment downward. Okay, now I can take my original, I can delete it, I can bring this back into a hole, join it, group that. There's our keyhole, so now I know that this is going to fit that perfectly every time. Get it set up, get it aligned up. That is a -90 rotate. So I know for sure that the builder is going to install this correctly because that key only goes on one way. This hole is a little bit larger, so there might be a tiny bit of wiggle room, and that's what you want. You don't want too tight of a fit. I want it to be a little larger with a little bit of CA glue on there. That's going to stay just fine. All right. There's my quick example of a directional key. Let's move on to our last sample, the tapered cone. Here is my last example. This is my favorite method of keying. It's the most versatile. It's the truncated cone. Let's go ahead. Let's get silly. We're going to put legs on this mug. So we're going to put a key system here. It's going to be a truncated cone on top of this leg so we can key it onto the bottom of this mug. I've got a cylinder here, so I know that my measurement, this fits just right on here, 12.15. So I want to make a 12.15 tapered cone, a 12.15 base. So I'm going to enter my dimensions, 12.15, 12.15, oops, 12.15, is that right? Yes. Okay, so I've got a 12.15 base, and I kind of went ahead of myself. I just went ahead and grabbed a standard cone. I'm going to turn its sides up to maximum. Let's make this a new color. So I only want the bottom of this cone. I'm going to grab a cylinder hole, and it's up to you how tapered you want to make it. I'm going to give it a taper like this, so I'm going to group these two objects. And I'm going to bring this cone up a little bit like this. Okay, I like that. So that cone is going to fit the top of this leg. I'm going to grab this object. I'm going to hit my cruise tool. I did a whole tutorial video recently on the cruise feature. Okay, I like that cone. I'm going to turn this into a hole. I'm going to make sure that it's embedded into my model. F to center. And that's not exactly perfect, but that's good enough for me. It's going to nudge it just a little bit that way. Okay. Double check that that's connected. We're looking good. I'm going to go ahead and group these two objects. Okay, here is our leg. I'm going to grab this leg, and I'm going to drop him into position. I can turn this entire thing upside down. I'll do that in a second. I want to get these legs in position first. So I'm going to get this leg, and I'm going to embed this cone right there. Maybe a little bit more. I can nudge this upwards by hitting my shift. Actually, it's the control tab up arrow. And I'm going to get him just so he's right there at that surface. Control up arrow. I'm going to turn this into a hole again. And I only want that cone to touch that surface. We're looking good. Let's figure out the look that we want. That's fine. I'm going to duplicate this leg. I am going to get my snap grid over to a larger scale. I'm going to bring him over here. I'm going to mirror him. This way. Nudge him over. Alright, there is our dude. I'm going to grab this entire object. I'm going to hit D. That's going to bring him back to the ground plane. I'm going to grab these two guys. Control D. Preserve those. Now, I'm going to take both of these guys. I'm going to ungroup them. Okay, these are ungrouped. I'm going to ungroup again and again. So now, if I remove these legs, that cone is left behind. So I can delete these legs. Now, you saw me earlier, because of the tolerances in printing and making sure parts fit, I was reducing the size of the keys. Actually, I was increasing the size of the keys. This time, I'm not worried about it, because these are tapered. So I don't mind if my print tolerances are off, because I can, with this taper shape, I can push that leg in there, give it a twist, and it's going to stay. So I am just going to turn these into holes, group to my mug body, and now we have our tapered keys in place. So these keys fit these legs. Oopsie. Bring these legs back into position. Okay, I know every time that someone prints this model that they can twist these legs into place. So now our project is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Everything has its keys. All right, so now in review, this model has 3 different kinds of keys. I've got this guy over here. We've got our block keys. We have a rectangular key up here, a square key here. That fits. We have our greebly that's using a directional key. So that's only going to go on one way. And then we have legs that are my favorite. It's the tapered cone. Those are going to twist on and stay on. And there he is. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Okay guys, I think that wraps up that tutorial. I hope you found that useful. If you did, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you have any ideas for future tutorials, feel free to leave me a comment, drop me a note, let me know if these tutorials are helpful to you. I'm not really sure what I'm doing next as far as this advanced Tinkercad tutorial. So maybe you can give me an idea. Just go ahead and drop me a line and let me know what you think. Okay guys, thumbs up, keep modeling, and I'll see you in the next video.